The Dershow.
This idea of everybody mentioned by any email immediately loses their job explains, I think, why there's been so much reluctance to have this thing go forward. This Epstein is the new McCarthyism. We're seeing new McCarthyism, denial of due process, denial of presumption of innocence. Decent people in the interests of doing what they think is the right thing are prepared to neglect the Constitution, prepared to neglect the rule of law in order to get their results achieved. That is very dangerous for America.
I'm going to move us on to our next segment in a moment, Anna.
I want to
ask you a question directly, Anna.
It's the result of a lack of justice for the survivors for decades. That's what happens.
It is for decades. And if
Democrats
were so keen on this transparency, why didn't they release the files when they were in office?
Because they're garbage and they were part of the cover-up. That's why. Because there are also Democrats implicated in the Epstein files. That's why. This is not a partisan issue. This is an issue of powerful elite individuals engaging in criminal behavior, in bad behavior, and cover-ups of their buddies and for themselves. That is the problem here. The American people, both on the left and the right and in the middle, want to know whether or not we are governed by and judged on based on pedophiles who have these and hold these positions of power. That's what we want to know. That's what this is about. This is not anyone who's framing this as a partisan issue, and I will concede that corporate media, legacy media, they're hyper-focused on some made-up partisan angle here. This is not about partisanship. This is about justice for the survivors, and it's about knowing whether or not we have disgusting pedophiles governing us in the government.
Respond to that, Alan, and then I'm going to move us on.
Sorry, I have to say something. You sound just like Joseph McCarthy. We have pedophiles running our government.
Okay,
we have imposition of authority. That's what Joseph McCarthy did. I have a list of pedophiles who are running America. You are a McCarthyite. You are the worst violator of due process. You are exactly what this country has to be afraid of. Shame on you.
This brings me exactly...
I would be more afraid of a guy who signs up to be the defense attorney for said pedophile, the guy who in 2018 provided legal counsel and advice to Harvey Weinstein. It is interesting. Has there been a convicted, pedophile or a bad actor that you haven't signed up to defend? I think your credibility on this matter is lacking. I'd say that.
Yeah, all right, let's let Alan respond.
It's almost like Alan's a defense attorney or something.
Let's just let Alan have a right to reply on that.
I am proud of my role as a lawyer, but typically of McCarthyites, you attack the lawyers, you blame the lawyers for their clients. You are the personification of 21st century McCarthyism.
Okay. I think this takes us nicely into our next section because we want to talk about justice, about transparency, about the victims here, which I think leads on from what you're saying there, Alan. Jeffrey Epstein died in a New York jail in 2019 while awaiting trial on these sex trafficking charges. So while all this political wrangling has been going on, the women who allege they were abused by Epstein and his clients have been denied any semblance of justice. Josh, bearing in mind what we've been hearing and Alan saying that this is the new McCarthyism, will the eventual release of these files lead to justice, lead to prosecution and more clarity, or is it going to just spawn more conspiracy theories?
I am deeply bearish on the prospect of meaningful justice happening. As a general rule of thumb, by the way, when it comes to scandals from Russiagate collusion hoax in 2016, I'm very bearish on the possibility of long overdue justice when it comes to the COVID-19 scamdemic and all that. And I'm equally bearish on the possibility of long overdue justice when it comes to this. There's all sorts of issues here that could preclude justice. One is that, what Alan is saying about let's get a full release with zero redactions. For better or for worse, I'm just here to say that is all but assuredly not going to happen. Whatever is released after this law that has just been passed by both chambers of Congress, when Trump signs it into law, there are going to be a lot of redactions there. I'm sorry to say it, that is going to be the case. The equally important, if not more important thing, is that I think most, or at least a lot, of what could possibly lead to a prosecutor to file charges is still not going to come up in this, because it's going to be under heavily sealed grand jury testimony that's never going to see the light of day. And there are all sorts of legitimate rules under America's system of criminal procedure why grand jury testimony really, with the most minimal exceptions possible, does not see the light of day. There are actually very good reasons for that when it comes to the structural integrity of the criminal justice system. Then there's also all sorts of possible statutes of limitations issues there. So no, for all of the above reasons, I don't see there being real justice there. I'm not happy to say that, by the way. I very much would like there to be justice, but I just don't necessarily see it coming. So I think the most likely outcome, unfortunately, is that whatever happens, perhaps it will allow President Trump to pivot and to move on, as he so clearly wants to do, to focus on the economy, things, frankly, that, again, I care more about, that I think most American voters care about there. That's the best possible outcome, but the worst possible outcome is that could happen in conjunction with just the continuing rumor mongering of conspiracy theories and ultimately no justice.
We lost your audio at the beginning of your answer there, Josh. I apologise for that. Anna, what do you make of what Josh has said? Will this be so heavily redacted that there, one, won't be any semblance of justice, and perhaps it's going to just become more fuel for this whole cover-up conspiracy?
I unfortunately agree with Josh. I think that is the likely outcome. The question is how the American people are going to react to that. I think one of the biggest problems we're experiencing right now in the United States, and I think everyone on this panel can probably agree on this, there is a lack of trust among the American people toward our longstanding institutions. And it's because they feel that our institutions have failed us. And so this Epstein issue is really at the heart of the rot that we as Americans are experiencing in our own country. And it goes to a much larger issue, if you ask me, about how these institutions absolutely must be reformed. Because if we can't rely on our criminal justice system to ensure justice for actual victims, for actual survivors of pedophilia, rape, and all sorts of other crimes, what's the point of the government in the first place? Why am I paying taxes? So these institutions can continuously fail me and my fellow Americans. So, I think that's actually a pretty good prediction, and it pains me to agree with that prediction. But what really matters is how the American people are going to react to that, because I think the reason why Trump changed his rhetoric in the last minute on the release of the Epstein files is because of the pressure he's been facing by his own base, to their credit.
Alan, what do you think, Alan? Go ahead.
I agree generally with everything she said. I think we do have a problem with trust in our institutions, the media, academia, the hard left, the hard right. We are moving away from being a centrist country, which is interested in objective truth and due process and the Constitution. Everybody today has to pick sides. And what I worry about is when you get a frenzy about communism back in the 50s, frenzy about the Epstein files now, when you get a frenzy, the first catastrophe, the first institutions that suffer are constitutional rights. They're unpopular anyway. Due process rights, right to counsel, who you can represent without being accused of being part of the cover-up itself. So I think we're seeing a diminution in respect for the Constitution, for the media, for government institutions. And I think the frenzy around the Epstein case has contributed considerably to the diminution of respect for our institutions, especially the Constitution.